This building, and I just really wanted to welcome everyone here tonight. How many people have never been in here before tonight? Lots of you. Wow. Did you have any idea what was in here before you came in? That you had all these studios, or a lot of people tell me that they thought it was a church for a really long time because it had a chapel in it and it had a cross on it, and of course it's next to a really big church next door. But it is a public studio. We have fabulous studios in here that are now public and available. We have in here, our real goal has been to be a beacon for people that are creating content, not just for film and not just for television, but all kinds of content. Content to make the world a better place. We have about 300 people working in here now, 80 different companies that are doing all kinds of amazing things with software and games and technology and applications and things that we have an amazing company in here that has software that that designers around the world use to help you find your way through a hospital or a university campus. And we thought, wow, that's happening here in this building. So we're very proud to have you here. We hope you'll come see it when we conclude our complete renovation at the end of the year. And part of our goal is to be a community hub, a place where the community can assemble on things like this opportunity, where you can gather and be together. And so we make the space available. We did so in the municipal election last year, and it was an overwhelming number of people in the neighborhood wanted to come. So we thought we're going to continue to do this. As long as the community wants to come, we're going to offer these events. And so I would like to conclude my comments by introducing our MC. Burlington Green is one of our fabulous tenants here in this building. We're so proud to have them here. And your MC this evening, and get ready to clap, is Amy Schnurr. Everybody know her? Amy is the co-founder of Burlington Green, and she's proudly served as their executive director since this impactful organization started 12 years ago. And Amy really is a long-time life resident of Burlington, and she's dedicated the past 35 years of her life and her professional life to environmental education, environmental protection, and environmental justice. And so please join me in welcoming Amy to the podium. Thank you.
Welcome. How are y'all doing? Great. Good? Ready for some fun? Candidates too? Thank you so much, Sean, for that warm welcome. I appreciate that. I am truly honored to serve as this evening's MC and part-time debate moderator. And I'll explain what I mean about that in just a moment. But before we get started, folks, I do want to begin by recognizing that Burlington has been a gathering place for people of Turtle Island for many generations. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Arawagaron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather this evening on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, water, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us. And what a fantastic turnout! Democracy appears to be alive and well in Burlington, and I'd like to thank each and every one of you for choosing to spend the evening with us. It means a lot to us. There's a lot of work put into experiences like this, and it makes it all worth it when we see folks like yourself coming out to give us your time and attention this evening. And as Martin Luther King Jr. once said, our lives begin to end the day matters. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge a few dignitaries that I can see in the room who have joined us. I spotted our mayor. If you could stand up, Mary Ann May Ward, thank you so much for coming. And Councillor Stolte, Shauna Stolte is here. Thanks for coming. Anybody else? Oh, where's Councillor Rory Neeson? Thank you for coming, Rory. Burlington Green, with support from our partners, is pleased to organize and provide events like this. We are here to aim to serve you, the community, as a nonpartisan charity. Our aim is to provide this event experience to help you make a more informed decision when it comes to voting day. It is because of our support and partnership with the Nouveau Network. Tonight's event is also supported with a partnership with the Halton Environmental Network, GreenPAC, which is the national nonpartisan organization that is hosting over 100 debates right now across the country that we're streaming, including this one on Facebook Live. I'd like to thank sponsor Face Drive for being here this evening, Lee for his tech work, and all of the Nouveau team and all of the amazing Burlington Green team members for all of their work. So thank you so much. And I know we're anxious to get started, but I know after these events everybody kind of mingles and moves away, and so I like to do the gratitude a little bit now. I would like to also thank the media for attending this evening and keeping democracy alive and well all year long by keeping the information in the media, in print and online and on television, and we're appreciative for those that are here this evening. A shout out to our friends Shane and Lisa from Provoke Media for covering this tonight for us across the nation through Facebook Live. And for those of you who are sharing your experiences tonight on social media, we invite you to use the hashtag OurVoice19 in your messages. Okay, and like most Burlington Green events, this event is Bullfrog powered with 100% green electricity. So that means that Bullfrog Power's generators are putting 100% of green power into the grid to match the amount of energy that we're using here this evening. So we're grateful for that. And a few quick housekeeping items. If you want to pay attention to the two doorways, just in case there was an emergency, they're right over there. And if you'd like to need to use the washroom, right across the hall, you're going to go through a massive, fabulous room that's kind of cool just to experience it. It's called the studio, and you'll follow the signs over to the washroom if you need to use those over the course of the evening. Okay, and last but not least, our candidates. How are you guys doing? You're ready, aren't you? You can't wait. It's both a rewarding and a challenging experience for every candidate that chooses to participate in the election process. A lot of time, financial expense, extensive communications, walking and talking in the neighborhoods, and sacrifice. And I'm sure you all share in my expression of gratitude to each and every one of them. Whether you are successful in being chosen to serve the residents of our great city or not, you are all to be commended for your dedication, efforts, and participation. We are very grateful. Thank you very much. Now, you're probably wondering, where are a few folks tonight? So this is my time to let you know that we are disappointed. We did actually get confirmation from all 5 candidates early on in the process in the summertime. We didn't want to host a debate unless we had everybody here before you. Unfortunately, the Conservative Party leader, Jane Michaels, did let us know that she had a scheduling conflict, so she's not able to be here this evening. And we just heard later this afternoon that the People's Party of Canada's representative had dental issues, so he's not able to join us. But a couple good things. One is we did receive responses from every single candidate in Burlington, including North Burlington, from our survey where we asked 8 burning excellent questions, and we got responses from everyone except for one person. So, although not all the representatives are here tonight, we encourage you to go onto burlingtongreen.org and you can hear what they have to say about very, very important questions, including these candidates who responded kindly to the surveys as well. So the format of the evening. And all of you, of course, or many of you, I hope, submitted your burning questions. And we have excellent sorters, Gloria and Marwa, who are going through those questions, and they're going to find the ones that seem to be the most popular. Obviously, there's over 200 of you. We don't have time for 200 questions, but we're going to select a few of them, and we will be asking our candidates your questions. And the other bonus is we have amazing volunteers at Burlington Green and team members, and they're going to actually be gathering up all your questions, typing them out, and they're coming your way. Now, the candidates are going to respond to them, but I know they all want to know what your questions are, even if they can't answer them this evening, so we'll make sure they get in their hands. Okay? Thank you so much, everybody, for your patience with all that introduction. Are we ready to get started? Yes? Okay. Excellent. So, in the order of the name picking, we're going to begin with Lene, and you have 2 minutes, as soon as the clock starts, to give your opening remarks. Okay.
Hi there, my name is Lene Lee, and I'd like to thank you for inviting me here this evening. There is so much that needs to be done in Canada right now, from a climate change and climate action perspective. Let's protect our air, land, and water. We all care about this. It affects our future. Flooding and forest fires are threatening our homes. Polluted air and water are hitting communities hard. It's time to fight climate change like we actually want to win. So how do we do this? We are addressing climate change through the New Democratic Party head on. We believe we can transition to a clean energy, carbon-free economy while investing in workers and creating jobs. We can make life more affordable for families by investing in retrofits, electric transit, and zero-emission vehicles. Together, we can protect our air and water and become climate leaders. And that's what I want to do for you here in Burlington. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it along to Gary.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Gareth Williams and I'm your Green Party candidate. I'd like to start by thanking Burlington Green, the Halton Environmental Network, and everyone who made this debate possible, as well as my fellow candidates in attendance and you in the audience tonight. It's a cliche to say that this election is the most important one in our lifetime, but this time it's true. Climate scientists around the world have repeatedly told us that the degradation of our environment is reaching catastrophic levels. Right now, we're looking at blowing through the safe limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius warming set by the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. But we aren't too late. There's still time to stop catastrophic climate change. It simply takes a government willing to take bold action. That's why I'm running in this election. I've seen what the current and past governments have done, and I know we can do more and better. I've spent the last decade taking personal action to reduce my carbon footprint, whether that was by installing solar panels on my home, or switching to an electric vehicle, choosing Bullfrog Power, or volunteering my time with groups in the community that are raising awareness of the environmental issues. But personal action is not enough. We need a government to make the big decisions that will lead us in the right direction as a country. As Member of Parliament, my first action with my fellow Green MPs will be to move and vote on a climate change act with serious targets, a 60% reduction in emissions by 2030, net zero by 2030, and ending the $3 billion per year in subsidies to fossil fuel companies that go to the biggest polluters. No more building pipelines, and a ban on fracking across the country. That's not all. As your MP, I'm committed to voting for an increase in taxes on the wealthiest 1% of Canadians and ending loopholes that big companies take advantage of in order to pay as little as possible. These measures will pay for the investments we plan to make to end poverty, create thousands of new jobs in a green economy, and not leave anyone behind. Thank you.
Great, good evening. I'm Karina Gould. I'd like to thank the organizers and everyone who is here tonight or watching online. Climate change is the most pressing issue of our generation. I decided to run for office in 2014 because I wanted a government that believed in science. I was 26, and like many of my peers, I was dismayed the Harper government actually pulled us out of the Kyoto Accord. Don't forget where Stephen Harper took us. He decimated our environmental protections, slashed research, muzzled scientists, and made it harder for our most vulnerable to vote. Our government had to fix this. Over the past 4 years, we have rebuilt and built back better. We revamped our environmental assessments. We have put unprecedented investments in protecting our oceans, our fresh water, species at risk, and our natural spaces. We have invested in research, and we are working in partnership with Indigenous peoples. All of this is at risk this election. And in this election, you have a real choice between building on the positive progress we have made and Andrew Scheer, who says his first act in government would be to make polluting free, who says he is unsure of the science behind climate change, and who doesn't believe in transitioning to a clean economy. I'm not going to sugarcoat things for you. On October 21st, I need your vote. In this riding, 40% of people will vote Conservative. That's what the record shows. That means Burlington is on the verge of sending a Conservative to Ottawa. And there is a real choice between a candidate and a party who has an actual plan to protect our environment, and a candidate who didn't even have the courage to show up tonight and who won't defend her party's plan to dismantle all the good work progressives have fought so hard for. The choice is yours. You can vote for me and get an MP who stands up for the planet, or you can get an empty seat in Ottawa.
Okay, thank you very much, candidates. And if any of you are, spinning around in your mind a question that you would really like to ask, there's still time. Feel free to fill out a form over at the table, and we have some volunteers who can collect your question, and we'll make sure it gets in our sorting basket. Okay? So, I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to be the one asking all the questions tonight. We're going to twist it up a little bit. And the first person I'd like to invite to the stage to ask 4 questions on behalf of GreenPAC is Lee Hartwell, who's on the board of directors of the Halton Environmental Network. So come on up, Lee. And I'll just mention that for those that don't know, I mentioned earlier that this is part of actually over 100 debates that are happening across the country right now. And so it's kind of interesting that there are candidates throughout this country who are actually answering the same questions that you're about to hear right now. So I'm going to pass it over to Lee, and he's going to ask those questions, obviously one at a time, and he's going to begin with yourself here, if you're next in line. Okay? And again, you have 2 minutes for each question. Okay? All right, here we go.
Okay, let's go. The first question, what are the key elements of an action plan that you will advocate for to ensure Canada meets its international obligations to reduce greenhouse gas pollution?
Thanks, Lee. I mentioned in my introduction that we, the Green Party, are committed to adopting targets which will hold warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Why is this number important? It's because once we reach 2 degrees of warming, we will trigger self-reinforcing cycles that make further warming impossible to stop regardless of what we do. A Green Party government will begin the next Parliament by immediately introducing a serious and comprehensive Climate Change Act. The IPCC's most recent report tells us we must begin reductions no later than 2020 to stay within the 1.5 degree limit. We have months, not years, to avert catastrophe. This includes a commitment to reduce GHG emissions by 60% versus 2005 by 2030, double the current targets set by the Harper government, which have been left in place by the Liberals, unfortunately. We'll reach net zero emissions by 2050. We are the only party that has a concrete plan that is bold enough to get us there. We'll do it by starting by phasing out internal combustion engines for personal vehicles with a complete ban on new sales by 2030 and exempting new zero-emission vehicles and used from the federal portion of the HST, launching a large-scale energy retrofit project of residential, commercial, and institutional buildings, including solar panels and heat pumps, and implementing a national electrical grid strategy to allow renewable energy to flow east to west, ending reliance on coal in Alberta and Saskatchewan. And most importantly, last but not least, canceling the Trans Mountain Pipeline, a project that locks in devastating emissions for decades, not years, and ending the $3 billion in subsidies given to the fossil fuel companies, again promised by the current government that they would end, and they failed to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Now we'll hear from Karina.
Awesome, thank you, Lee.
Where you go?
So I'm going to start on what we've already done over the past 4 years, because we're the first government to have a realistic and bold plan when it comes to fighting climate change. We've put a price on pollution, which, as you've seen, has been very contentious amongst the provinces, and they're actually fighting the federal government instead of joining us in the fight against climate change. We've committed to ban harmful single-use plastics by 2021. We're phasing out coal by 2030 and investing in renewable power like wind and solar. We are on track to meet our targets with greenhouse gas reductions. We're 75% of the way there. And when you include investments in public transit, renewable energy, and green infrastructure, we will more than meet our objectives. We've invested $1.5 billion in protecting our oceans and protecting our species, our natural environment. And we're making zero-emission vehicles more accessible and affordable. When a Conservative government in Ontario gets rid of the electric vehicle subsidy and rebate, we put it on across the country. We're committed to adopting a net zero greenhouse gas target by 2050, and we'll plant 2 billion trees over the next decade to absorb some of the carbon. Because we know that one of our best defenses against climate change is our natural allies. We will protect and conserve 25% of our land and our water. We've already protected 17% of our land and 11% of our water. We will create a net zero homes grant of up to $5,000 and work with homeowners by providing up to $40,000 interest-free in government loans so that they can green their homes. We recognize that to reduce our greenhouse gases, we have to act at the federal level, and we need to provide opportunities for individuals to make actions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. And now we'll hear from Lene.
Hi. The NDP has put forward a bold $15 billion climate change plan that confronts the climate crisis, limits warming to 1.5 degrees, and creates 300,000 good jobs. The plan includes major investments in low-carbon transportation infrastructure, like public transit, rail, and ferries, but it also helps families afford zero-emission vehicles through much more generous tax credits that actually grow if you buy a vehicle made in Canada, which will also help to ensure good jobs building the vehicles, and for the future of the automotive industry to stay here in Canada. It also includes help for families to install charging stations at home and investments to expand charging station infrastructure across the country. It also includes an ambitious building retrofit program that I truly believe will make a huge difference in the lives of Burlingtonians. Homeowners will be able to access no-interest loans to undergo energy efficiency projects in their homes. This will not only lower emissions and make homes more comfortable, but it creates thousands of jobs in the skilled trades and supporting industries, and save families on average $900 a year in utility costs. Burlington has already been facing some of the negative impacts of climate change. Extreme weather events are becoming more common and more damaging. Flooding has been a major problem for families. Our plan includes expanding federal funding by $2.5 billion to respond to disasters, as well as working with communities to proactively adapt their infrastructure to withstand extreme weather events like flood-proofing. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Second question of the night, we're going to start with Karina, and then we'll be followed by Lene and then Eric. So the second question, What can the federal government do to work with different sectors like municipalities and farmers to reduce both water pollution and the risk of flood events which have been aggravated by industrial development and climate change? Karina?
Absolutely, thank you, Lee. So Burlington knows flooding all too well. It was the summer of 2014 where over 4,000 homes were flooded because of an extreme weather event. And we have seen extreme weather events just increase across the country, whether it's forest fires or the flooding along the St. Lawrence this year. These are real issues that are affecting Canadians every single day. We have already introduced the $2 billion Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund to help communities prepare for climate change through more resilient infrastructure. We are also investing in natural defenses. So for example, here in Burlington, $600,000 to the RBG for wetlands rehabilitation, because the more natural wetlands we have, the better we'll be able to mitigate these extreme weather events. We're committed to an additional $1 billion for the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. And we're also committing to bring in new measures to support people coping with disaster, including the EI Disaster Assistance Benefit. Because we know that for so many people who go through this, they also need help to ensure that they're not losing much needed income in the time of disaster. We're also going to bring forward a low-cost national flood insurance program, because for those of you who are homeowners or for the people here in Burlington who experienced those floods, they often found out that overland flood insurance was not covered. And so we know that this is something that's going to be rising, and we need to make sure that we're helping homeowners. When it comes to municipalities, we are working with the provinces to make sure that we get all of the flood mapping done across the country so that we can better help and resettle individuals who are living on floodplains, because we need to make sure that we're prepared, that we're knowledgeable, and we're doing what we can to help communities and individuals who will be affected. Thank you.
Thank you. Alexander Lemay.
There is so much more that the federal government could be doing to protect our water and mitigate our risk of flooding. Our communities are already feeling the impacts of the climate emergency. Flooding has become a constant within Burlington. That is why we will expand federal funding by an additional $2.5 billion to respond to disasters, as well as working with communities to proactively adapt their infrastructure to withstand extreme weather events like flood proofing. We will also sit down with provinces, territories, and municipal governments to ensure that the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund meets the need of the communities. So working along with Marianne and ensuring that the municipal area gets funding. And the people who rely on it after a disaster. Burlington has seen firsthand the impact climate change and waste has had on our oceans and fresh water. As a first step, we will ban single-use plastics. Less than 10% plastic in Canada is recycled, and it does not decompose for a very, very long time. Instead, it breaks down into microplastics, which ends up in our food and water. We will also protect ocean biodiversity by expanding well and forest marine protected areas. Work to prevent ocean acidification and reverse the loss of coastal blue carbon ecosystems such as salt marshes. We will also work to reduce emissions from shipping and fishing, and work with farmers to promote land management techniques such as soil bioremediation and methods that increase carbon sequestration and reduce emissions. All this will require working with all levels of government, industry, and everyday Canadians.
Thank you. Gareth?
Thanks, Lee. While my wife and I were one of the families affected by the flooding of 2014, not as seriously as some here in Burlington, but it was a wake-up call, I think, for the entire community. And the last few days, too, with the power outages and unusual weather that we've experienced. The Green Party is committed to helping municipalities climate-proof essential infrastructure. We're falling behind in that regard at the moment. We need to have direct investment through the Canada Infrastructure Bank. We need to double the portion of the gas tax that flows to municipalities as a permanent municipal fund, which allocates also 1% of GST to municipal infrastructure and affordable housing. with an emphasis on identifying and prioritizing those areas most at risk of flooding and other climate change disruptions. We're also committed to implementing national standards for reducing the use of nitrogen fertilizers and pesticides that often run into our water systems from big industrial farms, and we'll turn off the pollution taps flowing into our coastal waters, including municipal sewage and industrial effluents. This will work hand in hand with our goal of protecting 30% of Canadian land and water from ecological damage. And like the other parties, we are also committed to banning single-use plastics by 2020 as part of a comprehensive national plastics strategy to keep plastic waste out of our waterways. Thank you.
Thanks, Gareth. So for question number 3, we're going to start with Lene, and then it will be Gareth, and then we will follow. And the third question is, what will you do to protect the quality and quantity of wilderness in Canada?
The world's biodiversity, our plants and animals, is declining at alarming rates because of climate change and the destruction of natural habitats. We need to act now to preserve and begin restoring our natural habitats and wildlife before it's too late. One of the most important things we can be doing is protecting more of our land, waters, and oceans so that our natural habitats and wildlife can begin to heal. That is why we're committed to protecting at least 30% of our land, freshwaters, and oceans by 2030, backed by funding and enforcement. There are also other proactive measures that the federal government can take to protect our biodiversity. One is working with other levels of government to develop a system of urban national park to support conservation and preserve our natural heritage. Developing a national approach to tree planting using responsible reforestation to help lower our carbon footprint. Support the creation of Indigenous managed protected areas to make sure that species recovery efforts uphold Indigenous rights and embrace traditional knowledge to increase biodiversity. Expand marine protected areas to protect ocean biodiversity and to fight back against invasive species. And also so much more. I'm a huge proponent of planting sunflowers for the bees, the honeybees to come back. So that's my personal give back all the time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Gareth?
This question is a personal favorite of mine because my wife and I enjoy so much spending time outdoors, exploring our natural world. We have such beautiful resources nearby here in Burlington, whether it's the Conservation Halton Parks and the Bruce Trail, which is such an incredible resource. But I also have had the opportunity to explore many other natural and protected areas of wild wilderness across Canada. And we truly have a land of natural beauty. It does require action on our part and the part of governments to keep it that way. The Greens are committed, as I mentioned previously, to protecting a minimum of 30% of our freshwater oceans, lands by 2030, and increasing funding to Parks Canada by $50 million so they can better protect and restore ecological integrity of our national parks. We'll also renew the abandoned process of the National Forest Strategy with a focus on restoring climate-resilient forests. We'll also fully restore the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, which was gutted by the Harbour government, and adopt the recommendations of the Independent Expert Panel on Environmental Assessment Commission, but then unfortunately ignored by the current government. This will be crucial to the process of identifying areas for protection and encourage broader cooperation among the provinces and Indigenous communities affected. Thank you.
So for me, conservation and protecting our environment is one of the reasons why I got into politics. Before I ran for office, I was on the board of the local Bruce Trail Club here at the Iroquois Club. And ensuring that Burlington and Canada have access to our natural spaces and that it's protected in perpetuity is one of the reasons why I continue to seek re-election. In 2015, only 1% of our coastlines were protected. Today, it's almost 14%. We've protected 17% of our land mass. We're committed to protecting 25% of both by 2025 and 30% by 2030. Locally, I'm very involved with the Coos to Escarpment Eco Park. For many of you, you probably know this is the last remaining natural corridor between Lake Ontario and the escarpment. It's one of the most biodiverse areas in Canada. One of my pet projects is working on a national urban biosphere designation to make sure that urban areas can protect that very special natural land that's close to them. That's what makes Burlington such an amazing community, because in 5 or 10 minutes you can be out in nature. What makes us one of the most livable communities in Canada. Sorry, Marianne, the number one community in Canada. Not the most, but the most. But it's those things that matter, and one of the projects that I'm super excited about is our Learn to Camp announcement that the Prime Minister made a little while ago. Because we know that if people are going to want to protect nature, they need to be able to experience it. So getting low-income urban youth out into nature, out into our wilderness, will make them the ecological protectors of the future. And so that's something that personally I'm very excited about should we be re-elected. Thank you.
So for the fourth question and my final question, we'll start with Gareth, then we'll move to Karine, and we'll finish with Renee. And the fourth question is, what will you do to ensure that Canadians are better protected from the health and environmental impacts of toxic substances? Will you commit to strengthening the Canadian Environmental Protection Act and the Pest Control Products Act? Gareth?
Thank you. I truly believe that the Greens are leaders on this issue because we recognize that Canadians have a right to a healthy environment and to know what is in the products they use day to day. So my immediate answer is yes. We are absolutely committed to strengthening the Canadian Environmental Protection Act and Pest Control Products Act. Our Green government will set strict standards on reducing the use of pesticides in agriculture and revive the National Pesticides Monitoring and Surveillance Network. We'll strengthen CEPA by limiting the approval and use of toxic chemicals and regulating microfibers as a toxic substance. We'll also ban all toxic ingredients such as parabens and microbeads in personal care and other products, including commercial cleaning products, and create an adverse effect reporting database for doctors and emergency rooms to keep track of health impacts from pesticides and other chemicals. Thank you.
I'm glad Lee is keeping track of who's going when, because I've lost track. With regards to toxic substances, this is an issue that I've talked to a lot of people in Burlington about, particularly in the last year. And actually, just a couple of weeks ago, I met with a group of Burlington moms who are advocating to reform the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. And we are committed, when re-elected, to do this immediately after re-election. And one of the things that resonated with me the most was they were talking about ensuring that their children aren't exposed to harmful toxins in commercial products. We often trust when we go to the grocery store, when we go to the drugstore, that the products that we're using are safe. And while they are, we know that the buildup of these toxins can be very dangerous. And so absolutely, as a new mother, I'm committed to making sure that we update and we modernize our CPA. We have already banned plastic microbeads in consumer products. We did that on July 1st, 2018. We banned asbestos. We're the first Canadian government to bring in regulations which took place on December 30th to prohibit the import, sale, use, and export of asbestos. We're phasing out coal by 2030, and we put in place regulations to reduce methane in our atmosphere. We are committed to a Clean Power Fund, $5 billion to support the electrification of Canadian industries, including our resource and manufacturing sectors. We should also remember that Andrew Scheer, at the same time that many of our leaders were marching for climate, was talking about getting rid of the clean fuel standard, something that would be akin to taking 7 million cars off the road. That's what the Conservative alternative is.
Thank you, Karina. And finally, Renee.
The point of our environmental protection law is to prevent harm to the environment and to people. If it's not doing one of those things, we've got to strengthen it. It's true that our laws and regulations aren't keeping pace with changes in industry. The law hasn't been significantly updated since 1999, despite being reviewed every 5 years. Canadians are still widely exposed to harmful substances like BPA in countless consumer products like water bottles and cans. An NDP government will better protect Canadians from toxic substances in everyday products by strengthening the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. We will also enshrine in law the right to a healthy environment to ensure all communities can enjoy guaranteed clean water, land, and air by putting in place a federal Environmental Bill of Rights.
Thank you, Renee. I must say, from my perspective, we found some common ground, and the candidate's been excellent so far, sticking to the 2 minutes, and I thank you, because it makes our job easier. I'll turn it over to Amy now.
Thank you so much, Lee. Appreciate it. Okay, who has learned one new thing so far that you didn't know before you came in here tonight from your candidates? Okay, that means you're doing your job, and we're doing our job. Thanks to your patience and your listening, and we're going to get going with questions that they've never heard before. So as I mentioned, those first 4 questions, they got advance notice on those. So did all the other candidates across Canada. Now we're going to shake it up a little bit, and we're going to surprise you with some questions, which is a lot more fun, I think. So to do the next one, we're going to invite Bridget Saulnier, who is a co-founder of Nouveau Network, and is going to kindly come up and ask the next question, which is on behalf of the Nouveau community. So Sean Saulnier, who kindly welcomed all of you here this evening, had mentioned what this community is comprised of, and we surveyed them. Not gonna lie, we didn't get a lot of uptake. There were so many questions. I guess they couldn't narrow them down. So we came up with a question, a bunch of us, that we think would reflect what some of the folks at Nouveau community would want to know, and that's what Bridget's going to ask you lovely candidates right now. Okay?
Thanks, Amy. It's nice to have the opportunity to ask the fun question or the start of that. So for this question, we're going to start with Farina, and then Lene, and then Eric. So that's the order this time. So the question is, if elected, what specific actions will you take as a Burlington MP to attract and support entrepreneurs and businesses to build and operate with environmental sustainability as a priority?
What a fabulous question. So as the Member of Parliament over the past 4 years, it's been a privilege to work with the Burlington Economic Development Corporation, the Chamber of Commerce, the Region of Halton, and the City of Burlington to partner in terms of how we can continue to build our community. And there's actually a lot of amazing green companies already here in Burlington. So Thornton Bearings, for example, they create bearings for ships that don't use oil, they're water-based. There's EcoSynthetics, which has created a corn-based polymer that now coats most of our cereal boxes. There's a lot of really interesting, innovative companies that are already doing work here. And one of the things that we're putting forward is we would reduce corporate tax rates by 50% for companies that create zero emissions technologies and products. This is a great way to spur innovation and to attract new talent to Canada, but of course here in Burlington. And here in Burlington, we have a really diverse economy, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's communications, whether it's small businesses. We have a range of businesses that are doing really great work. And through our price on pollution, we also have the climate action incentive. Because 98% of people in Canada work for small businesses, and so we're trying to help small businesses be greener. Because a lot of small businesses don't have a lot of capital at the end of the day, so we're providing an incentive to them through the federal government to green their own activities, whether that's about purchasing zero-emission vehicles for deliveries or for transportation, or ensuring that they can retrofit their own spaces to make them more energy efficient. So, thank you.
of the amazing things that we have here that's very environmentally friendly is the office environment here at Nouveau Networks. So you can rent an office space, it's environmentally savvy, you don't have the output within your own home or your own office structure. It's a shared environment, so that I think is very savvy. As well as we're doing investments into manufacturing, etc. It would be engaging people to come into the Burlington area and set up shop here, because we are the best city to live in all of Canada, which is pretty amazing. So that's about it. Thank you.
Very interested in how we can further help small business here in Burlington, especially those with the sustainability tilt. I served on the city's Sustainable Development Committee for 6 years, 2 years as chair, and while in that experience I had the opportunity, we invited some local companies who were doing great things in sustainability and products that are ecologically sound to present to us and talk to us about their projects and how the city could support them. So I really got a great experience working with the committee on that. I think that one of the major issues for small business here in Burlington is that they have an uncompetitive atmosphere because Canada, our tax code has not had any major reforms since the 70s, and we have a lot of loopholes that favor major businesses, major international corporations that get an unfair advantage over small businesses here in our community. So we really need to close those loopholes, make sure that businesses can thrive. The other thing I really want to touch on is making sure that the people who are the customers of those businesses here in Burlington can afford to go and spend the money at those businesses to keep them going. We need to have a guaranteed livable income program to make sure that everyone can earn a living and afford a place to live. Housing affordability, big issue here in Burlington as well. So I touched on earlier how the Greens want to help municipalities develop and enhance affordable housing. And the last thing I want to touch on is our transportation network. We've really fallen behind. Look at the transportation by rail systems that European countries have. We haven't invested in our transportation network to make sure that people can get around without dealing with congestion. Those are people that are customers and employees of small businesses that if they can't get around, they're going to be impacted negatively. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who wants another drink? Good, thank you, Candace, very much. And thank you, Bridget, for asking that question on behalf of the Nouveau community. Okay, I'd like to invite another friend up to the podium. This evening I'm welcoming Cale Black, who is, okay, all right. So, I'm used to it. Cale's been my right arm for the last 12 years. He's a co-founder of the Youth Network. And Cale, it was about 12 years ago when Cale started as a co-op student with Burlington Green. And after myself doing outdoor education for many years, I saw that there was a gap in the community. There was no opportunity at that time for youth in high school who were interested in the environment to connect with each other. Now, there's eco clubs in schools and that kind of thing, but there was no vehicle for which youth who wanted to talk or share or be solution focused about the environment. And sometimes it just is an idea, and somebody like Cale, who you bring on board to say, what do you think? Can you make that fly? And he made it fly in colors. So, he is asking the next question on behalf of youth in Burlington. Thank you, Cale.
My pleasure for the opportunity to ask this question. So, to all of the candidates, at our last Burlington Green Youth Eco Summit, where we had the pleasure of Dr. David Suzuki being our keynote speaker, we had 700 youth from all across Halton come together to voice their support for the not. If elected, will you champion this issue? And please include a yes or no in your response. My job to tell you who's first. Number one.
Okay. As I spoke earlier, yes, we would. We would definitely add a Bill of Rights, an environmental Bill of Rights. We definitely believe that healthcare is of utmost need and a requirement for healthy and safe environments. So definitely, yes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kale. Good to see you again. Yes, the answer is yes, absolutely. The Environmental Bill of Rights is something the Green Party is 100% behind. I've signed the Blue Dot Pledge, and you can see my name proudly displayed on the David Suzuki Foundation website, listed among other MP candidates across Canada. I was actually part of I mentioned my membership in the Burlington Sustainability Committee previously. When I was chair, we championed pushing our council at that time to sign on to the Blue Dot Pledge for the Environmental Bill of Rights for the City of Burlington, and very pleased that the council adopted it unanimously, I believe. Yes? Thank you. And I feel very proud of that achievement. That was a significant moment. I'm really upset that Canada has not yet signed on, because it seems like such an obvious thing that Canadians have the right to clean air and water. I was really inspired by everything that's been happening over the past 2 weeks with youth out marching in support of action on climate change. It was especially emotional for me. I have 2 young nephews. They couldn't be here tonight, you're probably in bed, but they're 3 and 5, and it's their future that we're talking about here tonight, and I want to make sure that it's one that is livable for them and that they have the same opportunities that I and previous generations had. And I think it's important to remember they are not marching to support governments that are not taking the action necessary. They are telling them to do more. Listen to what Greta Thunberg is saying. She is saying, we're not doing enough. Thank you.
So I've been at City Hall each Friday marching with those students and with the people who care about this issue, because as I said, this is the issue that is the most important and the most pressing of our time. And I support the idea of having an environmental Bill of Rights, but changing our Constitution is a very challenging process. Probably you remember, many of you in this room, Charlottetown, you remember Beach Lake. We can't change the Constitution without the provinces and the territories. And so we don't have time to wait for the time it's going to take to put this in our Constitution. We have to act now, and we are acting. I talked about the 25% goal of protecting our land and water, about planting 2 billion trees, about making sure that we're protecting our air and our water. I'm a mother of a 19-month-old. I want to make sure that he grows into a world where he can drink the water, breathe the air, walk in our forests, and see nature. And so while I support this, I also believe that we can't wait for this to be in our Constitution. We are acting, and we have to act. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of the candidates for their responses. And I've just been given the opportunity to ask the next question from the audience. So excited. So to all of our candidates, what is one policy item that is not in your party's platform that you would add regarding climate change? And
I think I'm in the hot seat for this one. That's a really good one. Not in the platform. Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit. So I've been a long-time advocate of electoral reform, and I don't think our platform necessarily directly relates it to climate change, so I'm going to say that it's not necessarily in the platform from that perspective. But here's why I think it's important. We have an antiquated voting system here in Canada that distorts outcomes and results in governments that achieve majorities with under 40% of popular support. And we've got a real threat each time we go to the polls that a government will get elected that will move us backwards in the wrong direction. We had the opportunity, we had a promise in 2015 that it would be the last election under first past the post, and that was withdrawn, and we are back where we started in 2019 with that same threat. So I'm really concerned that if we continue with this system, whether we have the result we want in this election, and I'm hoping that it is a coalition, a minority of the parties that can agree on a lot of these issues. You've heard a lot of agreement here tonight. We really agree on a lot of things. So let's not go down that road of letting a party take us in the wrong direction, and make sure that we change that system so that we don't have that threat on the present as we go into the future. Thank you.
So I already mentioned the thing that's not in our party platform, but that I've been working on and will continue to work on, and that's the designation of an urban biosphere here in Canada. It would be the first in the world, and I think it's so crucial to protect our sensitive natural areas that are in urban areas. We're seeing right now in Ontario what a Conservative government will do to protect its spaces. They want to pave the greenbelt, and they're trying to get that done. And I think we need to have a designation that protects this at the national level in perpetuity, so that we have access to local food, so that we have access to our natural ravines and creeks, and to our natural green areas. You know, you've probably heard, you know, if you ever go hiking, people feel better when they're closer to nature. There's a positive mental health aspect to that as well, and it's part of our amazing quality of life here in Burlington. And that's the thing that I will continue to work on and continue to fight for. And if re-elected, my big hope is that I get to announce the first one here in Burlington at the Coos to Escarpment Eco Park, that we can protect that and be world leaders in protecting urban natural spaces.
I think both of those answers were fabulous. And one of the things, I think I had a meeting with the mayor yesterday, and we talked a lot about how much out of a dollar comes back into the municipality. And we had a long conversation, and it resonated with me last evening. And I think to give the city a little more autonomy around the tax dollars that we are paying into the community, and to allow the city council that's been elected to utilize those tax dollars and move forward with them. So I think that's something that I would like to implement, if Jagmeet will allow me.
So just a final audience question from me. So to all of our candidates, what is your plan to get youth educated and involved in climate change?
Oh, awesome question. So I have a youth council. Actually, one of my members
I'm
is
so
right
sorry,
here.
I'm so sorry, Ms. Linnae, that is supposed
Oh,
to
sorry. Too eager.
That's my job to moderate, so I apologize.
I am not on the youth council, so. I have a 14-year-old son who is very involved. Like, he will scold me if I do not recycle or do not compost. So one of the biggest things that I believe in wholeheartedly is educating. The more we educate our youth, and the more people have the experience to move forward. So for example, we have a lot of single-use plastics. But do we actually realize that hemp-based plastics biodegrade in 58 days? So why are we not trying to add manufacturing with hemp? I looked all over to get signs for my campaign that were biodegradable and not plastic. And I couldn't find them anywhere. Nobody would produce them. So educating our youth on simple solutions, and I'm action-oriented, So one of the things is, I always want to come up with a solution, and what can we do to action that solution? So finding different ways. The Grassy Narrows Indigenous Reserve, where the water is contaminated. Why are we not adding clean bacteria into that water to make it be clean in a natural way? So, bioremediation, do people know anything about that? And it's natural ways to evolve our future. So education is the key. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
I was very lucky enough to be invited, along with my fellow colleagues here, the same three colleagues, funny enough, to the Central High School mock debate the other day, and we had the entire grade 10 class asking us some very great questions, and I really got a kick out of it, because those kids are really engaged on the issues, especially climate change. They're really committed to action, and they really understand the issue. Good work to Kale and Burlington Green for keeping all the youth here in Burlington engaged on it as well. One of the things that I mentioned to those kids the other day, it's their future, they should have a say on it. The Green Party is committed to lowering the voting age to 16 to make sure that they have a say in their future and can elect the next government. Thank you. Another key element is that the Greens believe that all Canadians should have access to an education at the post-secondary level to make sure that they can learn about whatever field they choose to go into, and maybe it's environmental science, who knows, but we want to eliminate tuition for all post-secondary students across Canada to make sure that financial reasons aren't a barrier to going to school and learning about their world. So thank you very much for the question.
So as I started saying before my turn, I have a youth council here in Burlington, and we meet on a monthly basis, and we talk about different issues that matter to them, and we go around and we meet with different groups. So we've met with the Bruce Trail Club, we've met with Burlington Green, and I'm not worried about our youth. Our youth know about climate change. Our youth know about the environment, and our youth know what we need to do to make changes. It's the other generations that we need to get engaged with. And, it's tough for people, right? Because, they're busy working, they're living their lives, they're trying to get to work, they're trying to do the best that they can. And I do believe the majority of Canadians really do care about the environment, but we need to give them opportunities to make greener choices at an affordable rate. And that's what our government is working on. Trying with the rebates for electric vehicles, building charging stations across the country, making it more affordable to green your home, banning single-use plastics, and providing alternatives. Our youth are all right. The kids know what to do. It's us that have to listen to them.
complimentary nibblies for everybody, some veggie nibblies to have afterward, and some refreshments over at the cash bar as well. So make sure you stay for that, as well as our interactive activities that you see around the room. And you're going to have one-on-one time, or gathering at least, to try and ask some of your questions directly to the candidates when they go back to their tables after the questions are all wrapped up. But we do have lots of questions, so I've been handed them and done my best to try and filter through. There's so many great ones to choose from, so great job, crowd, for all of your terrific questions. But the next one that we're going to have Karina start with, and then move to Lene and Garrett, is the following. To assist with providing jobs in green industries, how will your party green the skilled trades? And walk us on.
Excellent. So we already have the Green Leadership Initiative, which is training, I don't have the number offhand, but I believe it's about 1,500 youth in greener jobs. We also have a green manufacturing fund where we're trying to help manufacturers create greener trades within their companies to make sure that we're training the next generation of young people and skilled workers. One of the things that I hear from companies almost on a daily basis as the Member of Parliament is that they can't find people to work here in Burlington. We have the lowest unemployment rate in Canadian history. In 40 years since we started tracking, we have the lowest unemployment rate. And so part of that is that we actually have a worker shortage. And so we put forward in August a national skills strategy to get more people into the trades, and then also to train people in the technologies and the trades of the future. We also, with our 2 billion trees that we're going to plant, that's going to create 3,500 seasonal jobs. I don't know about you, but when I was in university, I had lots of friends who earned a great income planting trees over the summer, and so this is a great way for people to be outdoors, to plant trees, to do something that's better for the environment. But we absolutely know that the skills and the jobs of the future are changing, and that's why we put our national skills strategy in place. And something that we announced in Budget 2019 was the Workers Training Benefit, which will give $250 a year in credit for 4 years, up to $1,000 for workers to retrain so that they can keep current with their skills and also get employment insurance while they're going through that training and can also have job protection. So we understand that the nature of work is changing, that jobs are changing, and that Canadians need to have the skills necessary and employers need to have the workers to fulfill those jobs. Thank you.
So we are looking at retrofitting a lot of houses and a lot of apartment buildings throughout the country to make them more energy efficient. And with that, you need skilled trades to do it. So as we are evolving and doing more of this, people are becoming much more gifted in that area and learning a lot through it. Additionally, we're looking at auto manufacturing, so putting innovation credits into a lot of the manufacturing areas around the country so that they will be green and efficient going forward. So that will generate over 300,000 new jobs over the next few years. Okay.
Here.
Well, I would like to speak about our plan Mission Possible, which is our plan how we get from where we are today to the clean and green renewable economy of tomorrow. And it has 20 points that I won't bore you with going through all 20 points, but I think the most important one related to this question is a fair transition for everyone currently employed in the fossil fuel sector. We really have to scale that sector back, and as we transition, as we move away from the oil sands and transition towards renewable energy projects across Canada on a massive scale. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to put solar on my roof 10 years ago under the program that Ontario had in place at that time. That program created thousands of jobs for workers all across the province. I'd like to see that on a much broader scale and making it more accessible for people. One of the biggest barriers for that program was that people didn't know about it or that they didn't have the information that they needed. We need to, as a collective, work together to make sure everyone knows what's happening with those programs. The other thing I didn't touch on earlier when I mentioned education, a big thing right now is that the average student graduates with $27,000 in debt. The Greens want to forgive all, as part of our ending tuition fees, forgive the current federal student debt in Canada. There's $19 billion currently held in student debt by the federal government, so we feel that's a barrier to people going out, being entrepreneurial, getting started in the renewable energy industry. They can't do that if they're burdened by a huge debt. So we want to use the subsidies that we're currently giving to the oil and gas sector that we're going to end and help those people instead. Thank you.
And for the next question, and again, I'm reading these exactly as they're received. The next question is, will you, if elected, immediately align Canada's carbon reduction
mentioned the target earlier and how critical it is, because if we don't get the level of carbon reduction we need to keep warming at below the 1.5 degree number, we're heading for a world of trouble. Justin Trudeau told some U.S. oil executives a couple years ago that no country would find 170 billion barrels of oil in the ground and leave them there. We have a thing called a carbon budget we have to stick to as a planet and as Canada. Just the extraction alone of the oil sands, of those 170 billion barrels of oil, busts through our carbon budget. We can't afford to continue down that path. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are calling for a 60% reduction in carbon by 2030. That is the most aggressive of any of the parties. It's very ambitious, but we have a plan to get there. Please go by our booth and pick up a copy of Mission Possible to read the details. But it's not a choice. This is an imperative that we have to keep a livable planet for our children and our next generation. So just naming net zero 2050 as a target, 40 years or 30 years in the future without a plan to get there, it's not enough. Thank you.
So we are committed to getting to net zero by 2050, and we will legislate that we will have 5-year targets with reviews, and we will put in place a panel to make sure that we're achieving those objectives. But it's important to think when you're voting this election of who has a realistic and a possible plan in Canada and in the world. The alternative is Andrew Scheer, who's going to set us back over 20 years. But most importantly, we have a plan and we're working towards our objectives. We're 75% of the way to meeting our Paris targets. We're on track and we're going to get there. We're investing $20 billion in public transit. We're committed to building 5,000 more charging stations across the country so people can actually make the transition to a low or no carbon economy. That's what we have to remember, is that this has to be a plan that people can actually participate in. Because if we don't bring people along, we're going to end up with a backlash similar to what we've seen in Ontario and what we've seen in Alberta. And this has to be something that the whole country is working on, because this fight is too important to lose. Thank you.
So, as I said earlier, the NDP has put forward a bold $15 billion climate change plan that confronts the climate crisis, limits warming to 1.5 degrees, and creates 300,000 jobs. So through this, we're going to adopt science-based greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets by 2030 that are in line with stabilizing the global temperature increase at 1.5 degrees Celsius and be accountable for meeting these goals. We want to respect Indigenous knowledge and uphold Indigenous rights to protect lands, waterways, and biodiversity. Make all new buildings in Canada net zero ready by 2030 and complete energy efficiency retrofits on all existing housing stock in Canada by 2050. And get more zero emissions vehicles on the roads. Electrify our transit fleets by 2030 and work towards fare free transit with interested municipalities. We also want to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies immediately and get Canada powered by net carbon-free electricity by 2030.
Okay, the next question will begin with Garrett, and this is another great one from you folks. All right, Canadians polls have been concerned about climate change, but are not actually willing to support changes that have negative financial repercussions for them. How would you tackle this dichotomy?
Can you repeat the first part of the question?
Sure. I'm going to paraphrase it. I'm reading Canadians poll has been concerned about climate change, but are not actually willing to support changes that have negative financial repercussions for them. How would you tackle this dichotomy?
I think it's a matter of making people aware of the scope and the scale of the problem. It's been a challenge over the years. I've been struggling with this myself and everything that I've been trying to do for the last decade. It's not like that we can't negotiate with science and physics. This is what's happening. People are starting to come around, I really think. I know that the polling is sometimes looking in the wrong direction, but we have to bring those people along and talk about all the opportunities that we can create. The green economy is our future, and we have so many great opportunities for whether it's renewable energy or energy retrofits. I really think that those industries are in their infancy right now, and as people see the opportunities in that sector, it's already exceeding in renewable energy the jobs that are people that are employed in the fossil fuel industry here in Canada, and it's got nowhere to go but up as we have the massive project of retrofitting all our homes and businesses. So I think people will eventually come around. We just need to keep on talking about it and not give up, and we can't go backwards. That's not a choice. Thank you.
Okay.
We don't know which way to go up here. Okay. So taking action on climate change with real solutions that make life better for all Canadians. That's really the key, making life better for all Canadians. We want to create jobs and make our communities sustainable for the long term. Together we can create at least 300,000 good jobs, building the clean energy future in the next 4 years. Save families $900 or more per year on home energy costs with energy-efficient upgrades. Make public transit cleaner, more convenient, and more affordable, maybe even free. Protect your communities from extreme weather events like floods and forest fires, and make it easier to buy and charge a zero-emissions vehicle, no matter where you go. So if you're going to Thunder Bay, you'll be able to have charging stations all the way there. Thank you.
So thank you to whoever wrote this question, because I think this is actually the biggest challenge that we have, in that people know and they understand that climate change is real, but they don't know what they can do about it. And what we see sometimes, and I was actually at Emma Robinson talking to grade 10 students about climate change, and I asked them, well, why does this matter to you? And one kid raised his hand and he said, well, it doesn't, because there's nothing I can do. And you're just scaring me so much that I don't feel like I should do anything. And so we need to figure out how we talk to people about this in a way that shares the severity of the issue, but also provides opportunity and optimism for change. And that's what we're trying to do, and that's why our message of the environment and the economy going together is so important. Because if people think that they're losing out, they're not going to be with us in this fight. And so we need to ensure that we're providing the opportunity for transition for people who are working in sectors that are carbon intensive. How are we going to reduce those emissions, and how are we going to help them transition? Which is why we're putting a Just Transition Fund in place. It's also about ensuring that we're giving individuals tangible actions that they can take. So the rebate for zero emission or low emission vehicles, charging stations across the countries, the $40,000 interest-free loan from the federal government to do energy retrofits, and then working with municipalities. I was so pleased in July to announce $40 million for the Atmospheric Fund that is going to work with municipalities across the GTHA to reduce emissions. The TAF has resulted in the City of Toronto reducing their emissions by 40% over the last few years. We can do this, but we have to make sure that we're working together and we're providing opportunities and optimism for people so that they can feel part of the solution. Thanks.
The next one will begin with Lene, and then it will be Karina. So we have time for one more question before we have closing remarks. All right? So this one is as follows. The use of fossil fuels dominates the discussion on climate change. animal agriculture is also a significant driver of global warming. Will you commit to building on the direction of the new food guide and promote reduced consumption of products to address climate change?
So personally, I'm type 1 diabetic, and the new food guide is exactly how I've been eating for most of my life. I think that it's very environmentally savvy as well as health savvy. So it's predominantly vegetables, grains, and low on the meat elements, and I 100% agree and would agree with it. Thank you.
Well, obviously I was part of the government that brought forward the new food guide, so I'm very proud of the food guide that we brought forward. One of the other things that is really important to note is the over $100 million that we're investing in agriculture to make agriculture, Canadian agriculture, whether it's animal or plant-based, world leaders in sustainability. So helping reduce emissions, helping to clean and green our technology within agriculture. We've been working in partnership with our entire agricultural community to make sure that when it comes to sustainability, that Canada is world leading, and we're doing some really exciting work and innovation in this field.
Well, my sister's a dietitian and reminds me regularly that we need to eat more plant-based food diet, and it's something that I've tried to live myself in my life and make sure that we're choosing that option more often. It's very difficult for a lot of people to make that change, but we're increasingly seeing more restaurants and products in the grocery store that make the choice easier for people to choose a less carbon-intensive way of eating. I grew up on a farm, a dairy goat farm, and I know that farmers across the country are leaders in sustainability, and the small-scale farmers in particular are providing leadership roles. I think we need to reform some of our agricultural policies, and that's part federal, part provincial as well, so working with the provincial partners to ensure the long-term sustainability of small-scale farms and agriculture, to make sure that we're not going to these mega farms that you see in the U.S. Talking at an event last night where we were talking about cattle farms in California with 50,000 cattle and just insane amounts of livestock. That's not sustainable. That can't be something that we continue. We need to get back to basics and like you said, eat more plant-based foods in line with I agree with the health, the dietary guide. Thank you.
I've been busy trying to balance everything out. That's one up earlier. So I think we're on track now, so that here you actually get to hold on to the microphone. And we're going to start with yourself for 1 minute for your closing remarks. And fire away.
I want to thank all of you tonight for participating. I know you've heard a lot of numbers and promises and ideas from all of us here, and I hope you learned something about the priorities of each candidate and each party. If you'd like to learn more about my platform, I encourage you to visit greenburlington.ca to read our platform. I just want to restate how crucial this election is. We have months, not years, to reverse course on climate change. That's a fact that Burlington's next Member of Parliament must take with them to Ottawa after October 21st. The next year will be critical, and I personally don't believe we can elect or re-elect someone that doesn't take the threat of climate change seriously, not just in their words, but in their actions. That's why I chose to run, not because I believe in the Green Party's values, but because I know every Green vote and every Green MP is one step closer to an equitable society, a comprehensive action on climate crisis. You don't need to settle for business as usual or ineffective half measures. All hands on deck is what is needed. Thank you.
So again, thank you to all of you for being here, and thank you for organizing tonight's debate. What I think has become quite clear in tonight's debate is that there are 3 candidates here that are aligned in the fight against climate change, that agree that this is the fight we cannot afford to lose. When it comes to the environment, we didn't start at 0 in 2015. We started at -20. The previous Conservative government didn't believe that we needed to protect our environment, and the current Conservatives still don't. This election, you have a choice about what kind of government you want. One that cares about the environment, will act to protect it, fight climate change, and lead us to a net zero emission future. Or one that will take us backwards, not just undoing the work we have done over the last 4 years, but making irreversible changes that will take decades to undo. If you care about the environment, I need your vote, or we're going to end up with an empty seat in Ottawa. Thank you.
So as I said earlier, it's time to fight climate change like we actually want to win. So making life better for everyone is really what I want for my future, our children's and grandchildren's future in this wonderfully diverse country that we've all built together. We can make a difference in this city, and if you believe in the same things that I do, I invite you to join our campaign and help me make sure that Burlington is part of making life better for everyone. So thank you for having me here today, and I appreciate that you have listened attentively, and I also wish my candidate and my fellow candidates luck in the future.
A lot of kindness, a lot of respect on the state. I think that's a true reflection of our city and those that comprise it. And I want to thank everybody here this evening again, not only for coming, but for listening so attentively and respectfully. Like I mentioned, it doesn't end right now. If you have to dash, we understand, but I do hope you'll hang in there for a few minutes while I can offer some gratitude, explain the refreshments that are going to be available to you shortly, and a little bit about what you can look forward to going forward, and a last reminder to vote. So I did mention we're going to have some complimentary refreshments shortly at the back, and they are courtesy of Damien Wills, Chef Damien Wills from Nouveau Taste. So thank you so much for that in advance. You're gonna love it. Burlington Green is part of Nouveau, and it's one of the best. You know, we always say we love being at Nouveau Network because it's great food, beautiful spaces, and fantastic people. And Damien is the chef responsible for the food, so thank you, Damien. Again, I want to thank our event partners and sponsors, Face Drive and GreenPack and Halton Environmental Network and Nouveau Network. And I really want to thank the team that I'm most proud of, Burlington Green team, staff, the volunteers, and a big shout out, if you don't mind, for the gal who really made this all happen tonight, and that's Marwa Salim. Where are you, Marwa? She's going to get upset with me for saying that, but we'll deal with that later. And there's lots on the go here in the community. If you're not on our sign-up mailing list, I suggest you do that. That's the easiest way to stay in touch with not only events like this, but when we're getting trees in the ground, when we're diverting waste, when we're educating children in the schools, when we're gathering a youth network. We have a range of programs and opportunities available to help you help the planet. So please visit our table as well as everyone else's. We are a very lean charity, so if you want to help cover the cost of tonight's event and throw a loonie or a toonie in a jar on the way out, we stretch every dollar we receive to achieve maximum benefit to help the health of the environment, so we appreciate that support. And again, our candidates, thank you so much to each and every one of you, and I know you're going to stay a little bit longer, correct? Yeah? To be over at their tables, to go talk to them directly about questions that you didn't have a chance to ask this evening. So on behalf of everybody, our partners, Burlington Green, thank you very much for attending this evening.